Hey, I am John Barker, and in today's episode of Here to Record, Show and Tell, I want to just take you through a few top tips that I've found working as a sort of one-person team. I shoot pretty much all my conferences by myself, the very rare time where I get to bring somebody in to help me out. So if that's something you're thinking about doing or something you're already just starting out in, you might find a few of these tips helpful. So let's get started. Tip number 1, pack just the right stuff. Before I go off on a conference gig, I'll usually give the venue a call or an email and get a few technical details from them about what kind of gear they have and what kind of gear I need to bring to fill the void. So obviously I'm bringing my cameras, I'm bringing my ATEM live switching setup, but will I need all of my HD SDI cables? They may have a few extras that I could use when I'm there. Will I need to bring 10 meter XLR cables, or will a really short one do just fine? Or will they have that gear? Do they have power supplies close to me? Do they have extension cables? All that stuff. What I tend to do is just really plan things out, make a little list in a notebook of what I need to bring, and then I just turn that into a checklist, and when I'm packing, I just bring that stuff. And the reason I mention all this is because I don't have a car, I don't drive around anywhere, and the gigs I do are usually abroad, so I have to go on planes. And one of the best ways to start any sort of conference tour or conference gig is to be comfortable and bring the stuff that you only really need and not overpack. I tend to carry around 50 to 60 kilograms worth of stuff whenever I'm going to a conference. That's 2 big bags on wheels and 1 backpack, and all of that can weigh me down a lot. So the difference between that much, and if I can shave off 5 to 10 kilograms of cables that I don't need, then that's already a good start. It's good for my back, and it's good for just not bringing things that I don't necessarily need. So that's kind of my top tip. Number 1 is just bring what you need. Tip number 2, fixed cameras. So if you're like me and you do a 2 to 3 camera shoot of a conference, or if that's something you want to do, then you might want to think about making 2 of those 3 cameras just be fixed cameras. Get yourself a nice spot in the venue, and maybe at the back, maybe one at the side, and they're just a fixed location. They just stay right there. They get a wide shot and they don't move. They don't follow the speaker, they don't follow anybody. They're just fixed cameras. If you leave yourself only having to move 1 camera as the speaker walks back and forth across the stage, then you've cut yourself out a lot of work, and that's the best way to do it. Especially if you don't have a second person to come along and operate a camera. Just leaving yourself with 1 camera to move is a really good start. I tend to do live switching and live editing while I are doing my conferences. So really the only thing I can do is move that 1 camera with 1 arm as I switch between cameras with the other. So having 1 moving camera and then the rest of the cameras all fixed positions is definitely a good way to go. Tip number 3, maybe pan tilt zoom cameras. Just as an aside from my last tip, this might be another good way to do it, where all your cameras are in fixed positions, but you used a central PTZ control board to move them around if you want to. This can be good because then you can use a switching panel right beside your PTZ control, and it means that you don't have to run around the building and move cameras and all that stuff. So if you are thinking about doing this all by yourself, then PTZ cameras could be a way to do it. I don't use them yet, but it's something I would love to move towards. Tip number 4, there might not be any time for a break. When I'm recording a conference, I tend to do all the speakers, their talks, record all that stuff, and then also do like a behind the scenes highlight reel of the conference as well. Now the thing is that whenever the talks are happening, I'm recording them talks. I stick with my sort of production cameras and my ATEM live switcher. I stick with that stuff and I use that whenever someone's talking. But during the breaks, that's whenever all that sort of fun atmospheric things are happening. So I grab my other cameras, and now it's the GH5. Previously it was Canon camera, but DSLR basically, and I run around the venue and I get some shots of people getting their lunch and just chatting, getting some coffee, and maybe there's a fun little activity during the break. So it kind of means that we don't get breaks during those times. You might be able to grab a 5 or 10 minute break, but you just kind of need to be on the whole time pretty much. So I wouldn't go there expecting to get nice long breaks with everybody else, getting all the free food or whatever that stuff is. It'll be those times whenever you want to keep working and you want to keep getting shots. So yeah, just keep going, keep grabbing shots. And even if you are busy getting some lunch, that's when you set up a time lapse and you get coverage that way. So just keep working. Tip number 5, picture-in-picture is your enemy. There was a time that I used picture-in-picture, like a 2-shot whenever I did conferences. Somebody speaking, they had a little talking head at the bottom right of the screen, and then their slides were big on the left of the screen. But I've just scrapped that. I don't use that anymore. There's a few different stylistic reasons why I don't want to use that as well, but now I've realized that whenever I use picture-in-picture, it means that the camera has to be always tracking the speaker as they walk across the stage. And if you're doing this by yourself as a one-person band, then you don't want to have to keep following them around the stage, especially people who do tend to wander a lot. So what I use now is I use full frames every time, and I cut between all the shots. The wide shot, the close-up, and extreme close-up of the speaker's presentation, a clean feed of that. So by cutting through each of those, whenever you go to the wide shot or whenever you go to the clean feed of the presentation, that means that you don't have to move that camera. You don't have to follow them around. Maybe that's perfect because then you can go for a little walk and get some behind the scenes shots. You want to keep an eye on what's happening and if you're editing things properly, but that's the reason I don't use picture-in-picture at all now, is because I'm able to go to the wide shot or to the close-up of just the presenter's notes and our presentation, and then I can take a little break, rest my arm for a second, and I can really regroup. And then whenever I want to cut back to the close-up, then I can get ready again, cut back, and that's where I'm on the camera. So just something to keep in mind. Picture-in-picture sometimes can look great, sometimes can look not so great, but if you're trying to save your arm, or if you're trying to fill in the time with getting footage of them on the stage and all that stuff, and there's a lot going on, you might want to change to just clean shots of everything. And tip number 6, don't overpromise. If you're just starting out with this kind of stuff, a simple thing to do, and something I definitely did, was overpromise and then find myself a little stressed out whenever it came to conference time. There is a lot of time during a conference to get a whole lot of stuff done, but you have to really use your time wisely. A few things that I've found is that if somebody wants the conference recorded, and they also want a behind the scenes video, and they also want some interviews of some of the key speakers, and maybe they also want this other thing done. At the start, you can feel like you can say yes to everything and then figure it out as you go along. But what you'll end up doing is not doing anything well, and you'll be spread too thinly. So I think you should just learn your own limits and see what you can actually, what you can do to a high level of professionalism. So in my case, I tend to not do the interviews and that kind of stuff unless there really, really is a lot of time to spare to do that kind of things. I like to focus my attention more on capturing the talks. That's what I'm there to do. I'm here to record, as I like to say to them. I spend almost all my energy on capturing the talks when the talks are happening, and then whenever it's during breaks, then I spend all my energy getting a behind the scenes highlight video. And those times are very clear for me when I should be working on each one. And it also means that I don't have other things that I need to figure out. When do I have time to shoot an interview? Is the interviewee there? Do I have all the equipment that I need to bring for that? So you'll learn your own limits, and just like I learned mine, and you'll know when to say no to people, and when to say yes, and when to say I need someone else to help me, and bring on a friend, bring on somebody you know with an extra camera, and they can film the interviews, and just delegate that work out. So you got to know your limits. Hopefully you found that useful, and thank you for watching another episode. I will see you next time. Bye bye.